Welcome back, everyone. Ready to dive into a topic that's both timeless and super relevant to all of us.
Absolutely. This one's a biggie.
It really is. We're tackling happiness, but not just in a fluffy, feel-good way. We're going deep.
Yeah, we're getting philosophical even.
Exactly. Is happiness something we can choose? Or is it all about the circumstances we find ourselves in?
The age-old debate, right? Nature versus nurture, but for happiness. And the cool thing is, we've got a ton of different sources for this deep dive. Personal stories, scientific research, even some expert opinions that clash a bit should make for a lively discussion.
You know me, I love a good debate. But before we get into all that, I want to start with something a bit more personal, something everyone listening can connect with. How would you define happiness? Seriously, think about it for a second. What does that word even mean to you?
It's funny, right? Because one of our sources did that exact thing. Straight up asked its readers, how do you define happiness? And you know what? The answers were all over the place.
Oh, I bet. I mean, for some people, happiness might be hitting a major career goal, while for others, it's all about those close relationships, family, friends, that feeling of connection.
Totally. Or even just that inner peace, that feeling of being content with yourself and where you're at.
There's so much variety, right? And some of the stuff we read even made this distinction between happiness that's fleeting, like a sugar rush, and happiness that sticks around, that deeper kind.
That's such a key point. Think about it. Buying something new, going on a trip, those things give you a boost, but it fades. What we're really after here is the kind of happiness that's not dependent on stuff like that.
Okay, so we've got our own personal definition of happiness, and we're shooting for the long-lasting kind, not the temporary buzz. But how do we get there? Maybe science has some clues for us.
A bunch of our sources got into the nitty-gritty of the research, and there are some pretty clear patterns, things that are consistently linked to happiness, like strong social connections.
No surprise there, right? Humans are social creatures. We need those bonds.
Makes total sense. It gives us support, that sense of belonging, a purpose even. But here's another one, gratitude. There was this study where people who volunteered regularly, they were way happier overall.
Wow, so helping others makes us happier. Interesting.
Yeah.
What about mental health? That's got to be a factor too, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's like the foundation of happiness. And get this, our daily habits can have a huge impact on how we feel mentally. Stuff like meditation, getting enough sleep, exercise. Those things boost our mood, not just our physical health.
So it sounds like we're not just along for the ride when it comes to happiness. We can actually steer the ship a bit.
I like that analogy.
So now we're getting to the heart of the matter. Is happiness something we can choose regardless of what life throws our way?
That's the million-dollar question.
All right.
And, our sources had some pretty compelling arguments on both sides. On the one hand, there are these stories of people who stay positive no matter what, like incredible resilience. Maybe we do have more control than we think.
It's inspiring, right? Seeing people find joy, even in the toughest situations. One thing that kept coming up was gratitude. Our sources were practically cheering for it, like it's this secret weapon for shifting your perspective. Even had a practical tip. Keep a 3 good things journal every day.
Simple but powerful,
Yeah.
right? Write down 3 good things that happened each day. Makes you focus on the positive.
I like that. Okay, but let's not get carried away with the power of positive thinking. Our sources were also clear. The stuff that happens to us, the circumstances, that stuff matters too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. One source got real about how things like money problems or a toxic work environment can totally mess with your happiness. It makes you wonder, can we really be happy when things are objectively rough?
That's the big question, right?
Yeah.
Is there a limit to how much we can choose happiness?
And you know what? One of our sources actually set up this hypothetical dialogue that totally captures this back and forth. One person is all, happiness is a choice. You create it within yourself.
And the other person is like, hold up, real life circumstances matter too. You can't just ignore those.
Exactly. So I got to ask, where do you land on this? Are you team choice, team circumstance, or somewhere in between?
It is tricky, isn't it? I mean, I get both sides.
Yeah, I think the truth is probably somewhere in the messy middle. Like, our sources seem to say lasting happiness comes from both. How we choose to look at things and how we deal with the stuff that just happens to us.
Yeah, it's like a dance between those two things, right? It's not about pretending the bad stuff doesn't exist, but it's also about recognizing that we have some power over how we respond to it, what we focus on.
Exactly. Finding that sweet spot between acceptance and action. And you know what? Some of our sources gave us some actual practical tips for finding that balance. Tools, for our happiness toolkit, so to speak.
Ooh, I like that. A happiness toolkit. What kind of tools are we talking about?
One that stuck out to me was stop comparing yourself to others. It's so easy to do, but it's a total joy killer. And social media makes it so much worse. Everyone's always showing off their perfect life, you know?
Yeah. It's like a highlight reel, not real life.
Totally. Another one was make time for stuff you genuinely enjoy. Hobbies, spending time with people you love, getting lost in a good book, whatever makes you tick.
Even if it's just for a few minutes each day, right? Got to carve out that space for yourself.
And of course, we can't forget about gratitude. That 3 good things journal thing keeps popping up for a reason.
It's simple but effective. I'm sensing a theme here.
And you know what? To close out this part of our deep dive on a thought-provoking note, a couple of our sources gave us some questions to chew on.
Oh, yeah. Give them to me. I love a good brain teaser.
So the first one is, if you're happy NW, what helped you get there? Like, what are the specific things in your life that contribute to your well-being?
Ooh, that's good. Makes you really think about it. What about the second one?
The second one is, can you be happy without achieving your goals? That one's really interesting.
It is. It challenges the whole idea that happiness is tied to achieving specific things, right? Maybe it's more about the journey itself.
Yeah, like, is happiness something you can feel in the present moment, regardless of what you have or haven't accomplished yet? Makes you think, doesn't it?
It sure does. This whole deep dive is making me rethink a lot of things. I'm excited to see where we go from here.
Me too. There's so much more to unpack. It really gets you thinking, huh, about what actually goes into making us happy. And, building on that whole idea of personalized happiness, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier, our environment. Our sources made it pretty clear. Where we live, where we work, that stuff can seriously affect how happy we feel.
Makes sense, right? If you're stressed out all the time or you don't feel safe where you live, that's going to weigh on you.
Totally. One source actually made this point about feeling safe and secure in your surroundings. Like, super basic, but so important. Kind of like, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Got to have those basic needs met before you can even think about higher level stuff.
Right, like self-actualization and all that. You can't be worrying about your masterpiece if you don't have a roof over your head.
But it's not just physical safety, though, right? What about feeling psychologically safe, like in your relationships, at work?
Oh, yeah, that's huge. One of the things we read really emphasized feeling supported and respected by the people around you. If you can be yourself, without feeling judged, that does wonders for your happiness.
Totally. It's about belonging, feeling like you're part of something. And on the flip side, the sources were pretty clear that toxic relationships, toxic work environments, that stuff can drain you dry.
One source even called them emotional vampires, like people who suck the energy right out of you. You know the type.
Yeah. Got to watch out for those energy vampires. But speaking of energy, there was this fascinating connection in one of the sources between happiness and how healthy you are physically.
Oh, yeah, the mind-body connection.
Classic.
Apparently, happier people tend to have better immune systems, lower blood pressure, even recover faster from being sick. So it's not just a feeling. Happiness actually has real, tangible benefits for your body. I love how this deep dive keeps showing these connections between different parts of our lives.
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion, right? More and more keeps coming up.
Exactly. And speaking of layers, I want to talk about another piece of the puzzle that kept popping up in our sources. Purpose. Like having a sense of purpose, a reason for being here that's bigger than just your own individual happiness.
Totally. A bunch of our sources talked about how important it is to feel like you're contributing to something larger than yourself. Through your work, your relationships, being involved in your community, whatever. It's about feeling like your life has meaning,
Yeah, like you're making a difference somehow. And it doesn't have to be this huge world-changing thing either, right?
Right. It could be something small, like helping out a neighbor or volunteering at your kid's school. It's about finding those little ways to make a positive impact.
I like that. It makes it feel more achievable, But it also makes me think about another idea that came up in our sources, the idea of flow states. Have you ever gotten so lost in doing something that you totally lose track of time?
Oh, for sure. It's like being in the zone. Nothing else matters. You're just completely focused on that one thing.
Exactly. And apparently, those flow states are a big part of what makes people happy. It's about finding those activities that challenge you just enough, where you can stretch your skills and get totally absorbed in the process.
One source even called it effortless concentration and enjoyment, like that sweet spot where you're totally engaged and you feel this sense of accomplishment. I can definitely relate to that.
Me too. And it doesn't have to be anything fancy or complicated, right? It could be gardening, playing music, writing code, having a deep conversation, whatever lights you up.
Exactly, and I think that's a big takeaway from all this. Happiness isn't one size fits all. It's about figuring out what brings you joy and meaning, and then making those things a part of your life, like
Mm,
actively choosing those things.
so true. But it also means recognizing that some things are just out of our control. Like, we can't always choose our circumstances, but we can choose how we respond to them.
100%. It's about finding that balance between acceptance and action. Like accepting what you can't change, but also taking responsibility for the things you can.
And speaking of responsibility, I want to go back to something that's been coming up a lot in our deep dive: relationships. Our sources were super clear. Strong social connections are essential for happiness.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense when you think about it. Humans are social creatures. We crave connection. It's in our DNA.
It's not just about the number of friends you have, though, right? It's about the quality of those relationships.
Totally. One source really nailed it when they talked about the importance of having those deep, meaningful relationships, the kind where you feel truly supported, inspired, loved, and valued.
Those are the people you can be yourself around, the ones who you can laugh with, cry with, go through life's ups and downs with. Those relationships add so much richness to our lives.
For sure. But those relationships also take work. It's about putting in the effort, being present, showing up for each other.
That's true. Sometimes it also means letting go of relationships that aren't working anymore, which can be tough, but sometimes it's necessary for our own well-being.
100%. Setting boundaries is so important. It's a way of taking care of yourself,
Uh,
making sure you're surrounded by people who lift you up and make you feel good. It's not selfish. It's essential.
Love that. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from the science of happiness to the importance of gratitude, purpose, and relationships. It's been a whirlwind.
It has. But I think one thing is crystal clear. Happiness isn't just something that happens to you. It's something you actively create, cultivate. It takes effort, intention, a willingness to go after the things that bring you joy and make life feel meaningful.
It's like a journey, not a destination, right? And each person's journey is going to look different.
Exactly. There's no one right way to be happy. It's about finding your way. And before we move on to the last part of our deep dive, I want to touch on one final concept that came up in our sources: acceptance.
Acceptance, that's a big one. Sounds simple, but it can be so hard to actually do.
Oh, tell me about it. But it's so important. It's about acknowledging that life is a mix of good and bad, easy and hard, joy and sorrow. And instead of trying to fight against that, trying to force things to be a certain way, it's about learning to embrace it all.
Accepting the good with the bad.
Yeah. And it's not just about accepting the circumstances, it's about accepting yourself too, flaws and all.
That's where self-compassion comes in, right? Being kind to yourself, even when you mess up.
Exactly. And you know what? Acceptance doesn't mean giving up or resigning yourself to being unhappy. It's actually the opposite. It frees you from all those unrealistic expectations, that constant pressure to be perfect.
Which is exhausting. We're not supposed to be happy all the time. Life just isn't like that.
Exactly. And acceptance allows you to ride those waves, the ups and downs, without getting totally swept away. It's about finding peace with the present moment, even if it's not perfect.
And sometimes acceptance means admitting that you're struggling, asking for help when you need it.
Right. It's about being honest with yourself and with the people you trust. And you know what? When we can truly embrace acceptance, it opens up space for a deeper kind of happiness, the kind that's grounded in presence, gratitude, and self-compassion, the kind that can weather any storm.
Beautifully said. So as we head into the final part of our deep dive, let's hold on to that idea of acceptance. It might just be the key to unlocking a whole new level of happiness in our lives. You know those questions we talked about earlier? The ones from the sources, I keep thinking about them.
Me too. They really make you think, don't they?
They do. Like that one about figuring out what helped you get to a happy place. If you're happy now, makes you appreciate the good stuff.
Yeah, it's like taking stock. What's actually working in your life? Are there any patterns? Maybe certain activities always lift your mood,
Yeah.
or certain people.
Makes you wonder, right? Like, are we paying attention to the things that actually matter?
And that other question, the one about being happy without achieving your goals? Whoa. That one really gets you thinking about what happiness even is.
Is it about reaching some finish line? Or is it something you can feel right now, in this moment, no matter what?
Right. Like maybe happiness is more about how you traveled and where you end up.
Okay, that's a good one. Happiness is a journey, not a destination. I like that.
And, it made me think of something else, something that wasn't in our sources directly, but it feels connected to everything we've been talking about.
Oh, I'm intrigued. What is it?
I think maybe the deepest kind of happiness, the really fulfilling kind, comes from living in line with your values, like actually walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Ooh, I like that. It's about being true to yourself, right? Living authentically.
Exactly. When your actions match up with what you believe in, deep down, it creates this sense of peace, a sense of purpose. Like all the pieces are fitting together.
That makes sense. And it's different for everyone, right? Like, for one person, it might be about dedicating their life to some cause they believe in. For someone else, it might be all about family, putting those relationships first.
Totally.
Right.
It's about figuring out what matters most to you, and then making choices that reflect that. Big choices, A and D, small choices.
It's about creating a life that feels meaningful on your own terms, even if it doesn't look like what society says is successful.
Yeah. So as you continue on your own happiness journey, take some time to really think about your values. What truly matters to you, and how can you start living in a way that shows that?
That is a great question. Definitely something to reflect on.
It's not just about thinking, though. It's about doing, taking action. Because happiness isn't a passive thing. It's something you actively create.
I'm hearing a theme here.
It's about cultivating those habits, building those relationships, seeking out experiences that bring you joy, that make you feel alive, that give your life meaning.
We've explored a lot in this deep dive. The science of happiness, the things we can do to feel happier, the choices we make, the stuff that just happens to us. It's complex, right?
It is.
Right.
Happiness is this multifaceted thing, but one thing's for sure. It is possible.